Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It is in the description below. It is your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any of our platforms. Please reach out to me directly. I am tmosso@thewatchbox.com for pricing. Today we are discussing my personal all-time favorite Patek Philippe chronograph in yellow gold and launched in 1998. This is the Patek Philippe 5070J-001. Now, they were made for 4 years. 4 years for yellow, 4 years for white gold, 4 years for rose, and then just about 1 model year, spanning 2 calendar years for the platinum version. The original, launched at Basel 1998, is this yellow gold model, which in terms of design, shape, proportions, dial layout, even the color scheme, inspired by the Patek Philippe 2512 prototype chronograph, a 46mm giant from the 50s that you can see in the Patek Philippe Museum. And 42mm makes this almost the mid-size version of that, but by the standards of late 90s dress watches, 42 was gigantic. We were into Panerai and IWC Portuguese territory for the time. But today it feels like a good contemporary size as tastes have caught up with the 5070. 42 in diameter, 11.6 thick, from lug tip to lug tip, actually fairly short across the wrist for its case diameter. 48.5mm, it has a 21mm spacing between the lugs. And I'm going to throw the watch on my wrist, and you can see that it is broad and saucer-like, but it's also flat with a multiply stepped bezel and a not altogether thick profile. It will slide easily under a dress cuff. I love the punchy combination of black and yellow gold on this model. The finer contrast between the gray dial of the white gold model and the pale silver dial or the rose gold model, I don't dig that as much. This and the blue dial platinum, for me, the way to go with one of these. Now you can see it's fairly short across the wrist because this over-the-top angle often exaggerates the width of the watch across the wrist, and you can still see that the lugs are inboard. This is a better angle. You can wear this watch on a wrist of 14 centimeters circumference. Taking a look at the strap, you can see we got a calfskin black with a contrasting stitch on the bottom. It's a Patek Philippe factory strap in excellent condition. You can see the Calatrava cross, little pull tab spring bars here so you can pop the strap off the case without a tool if you wish to do so. The Calatrava cross, the symbol of the brand, you can find it on the crown as well. It is atop the single fold snap shut or friction fit deployant clasp that is Patek branded internally and all of high polish. Jumping back to the watch itself, you can see it too is of high polish. Now, the first thing I look at when gauging the condition of these is how sharp the fluting on the lugs remains and how sharp the steps of the case band and the bezel are. Here you can see that this watch, if it's been polished rarely, maybe once and professionally, as the lug fluting remains super well defined, and you can really see that here. From that angle, it's particularly apparent, and you can see the same as the preservation of the factory bevel, or the factory fluting, I should say, is evident at all 4 corners. Now, the edge of the case, too, this should be sharp, along with the tiers of the pagoda-like bezel. And the tiers of the bezel, as well as the concentric scales of the dial, designed to disguise the disparity between the Lemania-based movement and the size of the case. But it is, at the same time, a little bit of a flaw, but a beautiful flaw. It's like the mole on a supermodel, Cindy Crawford and her mole. She was more intriguing for it than she would have been without it. And this watch is very much like that. As we have rectangular pushers, we have very slightly cambered and boxed sapphire. The dial, gilt or golden printed with recessed sub-registers, bilateral symmetry, split it down the center. It's identical side to side. Applied yellow gold Arabic numerals cropped by the registers with leaf-style hands for the hours and minutes, and a counterweighted lancet-style seconds hand. We've got nice mid-century style tachymeter on the dial that can be used in conjunction with the chronograph to gauge the speed of an object moving very fast, unless you're good with mental decimals, then you can step up or step down. Screwed in case back, 30 meters water resistant. This watch is the heir to the 1463, but it's hard to believe that between the phase out of the 1463 in the late 60s, possibly early 70s before the last of them were shipped, but between that point and the arrival of this in 1998, Patek did not have a simple chronograph only option in the catalog. There were perpetual calendar chronographs and split-second chronographs, but there was no direct replacement for the 1463 until 1998, and this was that. Now, the movement is Lemania-based, but it's basically Patek Philippe's own, again, screwed in case back 30 meters, water-resistant. You can see, too, that by this point, Patek was making its own cases. You can see the same thing on the clasp, made in-house. But the movement is based on the Lemania 2310, or it might be based on the 2320, which is a more luxurious version of the 2310. Now, the 2310 is well known. It was developed by Lemania and Omega jointly in the early 1940s, and famously it flew to the moon as the Caliber 321 and the Speedmaster. Well, here it does business as the 2770, so still manual wind. Power reserve from the Lemania to the Patek goes up from 48 to 60 hours. The flat hairspring of the Lemania is replaced by this handmade overcoil. The unadjusted Lemania here gets adjusted in 6 positions. The Lemania's mobile stud index regulation system gets replaced with Patek Philippe's Gyromax system. The beat rate, in common with the Lemania, is 18,000 vibrations per hour, and you can see that this watch makes up with balanced size and inertia and mass what it lacks in absolute beat rate. And while the Lemania is not particularly decorated, this is Geneva hallmark. It is a column wheel, lateral clutch. You can see the lateral clutch in action. You can also see the micrometric eccentric screw regulator that's used to fine-tune the meshing of the driving wheel, intermediate wheel, and chronograph center wheel. Now, this is a capped column wheel in Geneva fashion, the idea originally being to prevent the horns and levers from popping out of the crenellated towers under a condition of shock. Like so many elements of finish, it has its roots in function. So too does beveling. You can see we have mirrored anglage perfectly rounded on the edges of the bridges in brass and the chronograph components in steel. You can see that beveling, and you can see that we have interior angles on the chronograph bridge where 2 bevels meet in a sharp crease. Very impressive. But the original idea behind beveling was to create a surface against which a screwdriver or a tool could accidentally strike without breaking off a sharp burr from a pointed edge, so not creating debris that might fall into the mechanism. That was the original point of anglage, whereas Côte de Genève would remove the evidence of machining of the bridges and plates. The slotting of the screws would better help the screwdrivers to slot into the screws, and over time a bevel was added to the edge of the screws themselves, and you can see all screws here are mirror polished with a black finish so that they turn black as you move them through the light. Chronograph components are beveled on their edges and they're satinated on their top. You can see everything here that's steel, and a lever, horn, or recentering hammer, or the chronograph brake, that is all steel. And it is a spectacular sight, detailed in ways that you don't even notice at first, such as the locating pegs used to help locate the escapement bridge. Those are polished on their top, and the escapement bridge itself is hand finished, even though it would be a challenge to see it without a loop. Everything about this watch exceeding expectations. One of Patek's all-time greats and a personal favorite of mine. It doesn't have hacking seconds, but that's just about the only refinement it lacks. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.